Welcome to our show. Over the next few weeks, I'll be talking to people who've had outstanding success in their careers and finding out why, discovering the influences that shaped their destinies. We start with an actor. Well, that's a bit like saying that Oscar Peterson tickles the ivories. The truth is, he's a very special actor. For one thing, he's an international star who's won just about every major honour his profession can offer. But more special is the relationship that he's got with the public. His great friend Billy Wilder, who directed him in some of his most successful films, once said, and I quote, "Audiences can tell by looking in his face what goes on in his heart and his brain. They have the greatest rapport with an actor since Chaplin." Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Lemmon. That acclaim that you got, Jack, as you came on there, when you were a young kid dreaming of being an actor, was it acclaim that you wanted, or did you want to be an actor?
I think it probably was both. I don't think there's any... I don't know how well we analyze ourselves, and I have not been analyzed because I've always been afraid of spilling the beans and upsetting the apple cart here and finding out what makes me tick, and everything could go out the window. You know that old story about the comic who was the funniest man on the earth and the biggest hit in the world, but he was miserable. He went to the analyst, found out what was wrong, finally became happy, and then he killed his analyst because he never got any laughs after that. So I've been afraid to go to a doctor. I think it's both. I really genuinely love acting and respect it as a craft. I do think it really is a noble profession. And I think that we're very fortunate if we can make a living in it and become successful in it, because you can not just entertain people, you can touch them, and you can move them, and you can enlighten them, and we don't, as people, get that opportunity all the time, you know, in an everyday walk of life, but actors can get that opportunity at times. But I think also, without any question, there is the desire to be accepted. Yes. Or acclaimed, yes. Within most of us, whether we're aware of it or not.
What about the influences in the early days? I mean, your parents, you came from quite a sort of middle-class background, didn't you? Yeah. You were a Harvard man yourself. I mean, your career was, I suppose, had you followed your father, you'd have been a businessman. Yeah. Were your mum and dad an influential part of your growing up to be an actor?
Yes, to an extent. My mother was all for it. She thought it was just wonderful. But her whole thing was the glamour of it, I think. I don't think she really thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if you were a very fine actor? I think the idea of being in showbiz, as we called it, was terrific. And she always said that when she was very young, that she had wanted to not be an actress, but to be in light opera. And the family had said no, because one doesn't do that, you see. And actors were still a bit frowned on. And my father didn't dissuade me, but he was very worried about it. And I think he would have been extremely happy if he was in the baking industry, and if I had gone in to his company, started at the bottom as he did and worked my way up, he would have been very happy. And that's very understandable. But his fear was purely, the chances are 1,000,000 to 1 that you won't, which is true. He was immensely proud, and both of them are gone now and have been for years, but both of them were still around after I had more or less really started going and had a good career going, thank God, and they both enjoyed it immensely.
Let's talk about the influences on you when you finally, I mean, you had a long period where you served your apprenticeship in the theatre. Eventually you went to Hollywood, and that's where most people know you, because of your parts in films. Let's talk about one or two people who might have influenced you there. I mean, you worked in one of your very early films with James Cagney. Was meeting somebody like Cagney influential?
Oh, you know, he did an amazing thing, and I'll try to make this very brief. But this man's incredible perception among all of the wonderful qualities was absolutely staggering. About a year before, at least a year before we started doing the film,
Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts. I had done a live television show in New York. It was before I had moved out to California. And just for my own amazement, and I was playing a lead in it, so I was on screen quite a bit of the time, I decided I was going to play the whole thing left-handed. This was just the method actor indulging himself. I was going to do the whole thing left-handed. I invented more business, as we call it, with props going and everything, and it was an hour show. I must have been on screen 40 or 50 minutes. Everything was with my left hand. And nobody, including my wife or the director or anybody else in the cast, ever picked up on it. Nobody knew. It was just something I wanted to see if I could do. In those days, there was no tape or film or anything, but they had kinescopes, and they ran them on the coast 2 or 3 weeks later. Cagney apparently had seen a kinescope of that show a year before, when it had been shown on the coast. We never met. When we were introduced at the airport, going on location to start filming Mr. Roberts, he was introduced to me. He says, "Oh, yes." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I saw you do a couple of TV things." He says, "And I like your work. Tell me, are you still trying to pretend that you're left-handed?" Almost, but it's true. Absolutely true. He caught it and also knew that I wasn't left-handed.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, he's a wonderful guy. Not only a good, marvelous actor, but a wonderful huffer too. I mean, Astaire said he was the best huffer in the business.
He was.
Yeah.
He's
superb. Again, I mean, in this period, I mean, you're lucky in a sense when you first went to Hollywood, weren't you? Because you started work with great stars like Cagney, and it wasn't too long before you met, I suppose, the biggest influence on your career in films. That was Billy Wilder. Yeah. Yeah. How did that happen? The Wilder relationship.
I had met Billy. I guess it was about 4 years after I started. I did about 5 years. The first film was late '54, and Some Like It Hot came along in '59, and we had met socially, just hello, how are you, that's all, and I had admired his work, my God, from the time I was a kid. But I didn't know him well. He came up to me in a restaurant, and I was sitting with Felicia and having a bite, and I said, "Hello, Billy," and he says, "Listen," he says, "could I sit for just a moment at the front? I want to say something very quick." And I said, "Sure, sir." And so he says, "I got this thing here." He says, "It takes place there are a couple of guys, they're musicians, and they see the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and the gangsters with the they see you, and you run with this other guy, and now you gotta hide because they're gonna go and they're gonna get you, and so you join an all-girl orchestra, which means you're gonna be in drag for about 3/4 of the picture. You gonna do it?" And for some reason, I thought for one split second, and I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay." And he walked away. And about 6 months later, the script showed up, and I read it. I thought it was the most brilliant farce I'd ever read. But it literally happened that way.
It holds up still today, of course. When you... Is she difficult?
Yes. She was, but she was divine, as we know. She was difficult, but not on purpose. She was not temperamental. She just was very, very late, and she would be fully made up or whatever, be on the set, and not in her dressing room, the permanent one, but on a little portable one, you know, the little huts that they'd have on the set, ready to go. But until she was psyched up personally and ready, she just couldn't come out and face it, and it drove, it did not bother me as much. It bothered Tony more, but in the second half of the film, he had the very long scenes with her. I was off dancing with Joe E. Brown with a rose in my teeth, you know. I'll be late, Marilyn, I don't. She was difficult that way, but it was not, as I say, temperamental. It was just the only way she knew how to work. And she would take very, very many takes sometimes.
How many?
Well, one time we went about, I won a lot of money from Tony, because he said, "We'll get it by take 40, and it went 47, so I won 10 bucks. She just would stop a scene in the middle, even though it was going fine as far as the director and as far as the other actors went. But if it didn't feel right to her, she would just say sorry, and she'd just shake her hands to loosen up and relax and turn, and we'd do it again. Again, not temperament. Something wasn't quite clicking for her, you know. And all she had to do was come in and say, "Where is that bourbon?" "Oh, there it is." And Tony and I were standing there with our wigs and the stuff on. And that was it. And we got up to about take 42 or 3, you know, with, "Where is that bourbon?" "Oh, there." Sorry. And it would stop. Where's that bourbon? Oh, there it is. That's all there was to it. Well, Billy had given her 85,000 different ways to do it. And nothing had really taken. And I mean, he really, one of the world's greatest directors, was at wit's end as to what to do with her now. And finally, just before we did get it, and she stopped again, he said, "Well, Marilyn, possibly if you..." And she said, "Don't talk to me now. I'll forget how I want to play it." Really stopped. I mean, I have never seen Wilder stopped cold before. But again, I say this not in any derogatory sense, because nobody was like Marilyn. She was unique. She was a wonderful comedian and had a charisma that nobody has had before or since. She was totally unique.
I mean, it's observably true because of the casualties in Hollywood that it can be a very, very grim place for a woman.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially for a woman.
Especially for a woman. Well, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think because if whatever happens, I'm aware of it, for instance, when friends of ours have been divorced, that the woman is the one who suffers the most socially, because suddenly you're a woman alone in this vast, huge place. You know, which unlike other major cities, you have to have an automobile to get anywhere. You're removed from everything, and so it's tougher on a woman on every level, I think, to be alone than it is on a man. I don't know why, but I think we'd all probably agree with that. And the same thing seems to happen in the business. A man is a man, but a woman is, it's just tougher on her when she has to struggle alone.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Do you ever thank God that you were born a man, being in the business you're in?
God, I never thought of it. I'm glad the way things happened, but I swear to God, until you said that now, I never even thought about it.
Yes. What about some of the others? Because, I mean, you worked with, you see, very early on, you worked with Betty Grable, didn't you?
Yes, she was divine.
Was she?
You know, it's interesting that people like Betty Grable, and then later I worked with Rita Hayworth.
Rita Hayworth, yes.
They were just universally adored by everybody in the business. I never heard one soul from the grips, from the crew, from the fellows that worked on the sets, on up and down, say a word that wasn't nice about either of those ladies. And quite rightfully so, because there was no star thing, you know, I am the star. There was none of that baloney. They were just absolutely down to earth. And when I came over here, as a matter of fact, to do Fire Down Below 1,000 years ago with Rita Hayworth and Bob Mitchum, Rita was somewhere in Europe, and we were all going to meet here in London. And when I left the Columbia lot, I must have come with 22 little folded pieces of papers from painters, from makeup people, from crew members, saying, just bring this note to Rita. They all just wanted to say, we miss you, we love you, you know, and that's rare. It's a lovely quality that both of them had. Even
though you've never contemplated what life might have been like had you been a woman, of course you had to play a woman in Some Like It Hot. Yeah. Was there a kind of ultimate test that Wilder put you to? When you knew, or you knew, that you were absolutely right, you were a woman, you could be accepted by
there was a
woman.
makeup, yes. The crazy thing happened. Of course, we were all, Billy included, very worried about it, because it's a fine line. It's a farce, yes, and you want to have fun, yes, but there still has to be the believability. In other words, that picture wouldn't work if we had to stop and think, if I were a member of that girl's orchestra, I wouldn't believe that they weren't men. So you have that, you've got to just be able to get over that and still have the fun of knowing they're men impersonating women to save their lives. We went through 4 or 5 days solid, about 6 or 8 hours a day of makeup and wigs, sitting with a couple of makeup men, Tony and I, in front of the mirror, working on what we wanted to get and what we thought would be right. And finally, for some unknown reason, about the 3rd, 4th day, it got to be around 12 or 12:30, so we decided to break for lunch, and we had all of the makeup and wig on. And as we walked out of the makeup department towards the commissary, I got an idea, and I said, "Follow me," to Tony. And I just brought him into the public women's room, you know, into the toilet. And there was girls going in and out, ladies, women, older, younger, whatever, and so forth, from other films and everything. Well, we were in period costume. They didn't know we could be shooting any old picture there. And we just went into the inner part, the powder room part of it, and just fooled around with makeup for about 10 minutes, and there wasn't one woman that batted an eyeball. And they'd start to make little conversation like, how's the picture going, honey? And I'd say, oh, fine. And keep on going with the bee stings and everything. So we went back to Billy and told him, he said, don't touch anything. And that literally is how we arrived at the end of it. It happened to be the way it was in the film at that point when I did that.
That's the best piece of acting, most convincing piece of acting you've ever done in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a break now. We're back in just a moment to talk some more with Jack Lemmon. And welcome back. Jack, talking about influences, can I ask you a question about how parts that you've played influenced you? Because the one thing about you on screen is that you have this believability, the absorption you have in a part. You make it live. Do parts affect you?
It's happened to me only once or twice.
When were they?
The worst time was Save the Tiger. A little bit in Days of Wine and Roses. It began to get to me. And I began to get terribly depressed and wonder why it was. Now, my father was getting seriously ill at that time, and I thought that was it. He then went into a remission, and I realized it wasn't that. It was the part. Because actors also, I think, are a little afraid of losing it. You don't close the door, the office door at 6 o'clock at night, leave the work on the desk, come home, play with the wife and kids. And you'll begin to act and behave the way the character does, which is why there's an advantage in being married to an actress who may understand this at times, because I know I've driven Felice up the wall at times, but she knows what it is.
Yes. I mean, what did you do in Days of Wine and Roses? I mean, did you start drinking more?
No, I didn't drink more.
No.
It wasn't that. I couldn't drink more. Oh, no, I didn't drink more. I really just became obsessed and frustrated, as the character was, and as drunkards will, when they start finding every other excuse in the world for what is really troubling them, except the drinking, you see. And so then they take another drink because they don't feel too well. The whole thing is the devil, you know. It's a ploy, really, inside yourself. You delude yourself and then take a drink to feel better.
Did you actually...
I began to think like him. I didn't start drinking more, but I had the depressions and a general feeling of emotional malaise as the character did, as he became actually an alcoholic. In the film.
But the research you did must have been very depressing, too, for that film.
Oh, God, yes. We went, well, I went to AA meetings just on my own. I didn't tell anybody, you know, that I was there for research or anything else. I just went to some AA meetings, as the character did in the film. And for some peculiar reason, they welcomed me with open arms, like, where have you been? I don't know why they did that, at any rate. And also, Lee Remick and I made 2 or 3 trips late at night to drunk tanks in the jail. And that is the most depressing thing in the world, because there are poor souls absolutely stripped of the last shred of human dignity.
You mentioned that as well that you had a wife who was an actress because she understood. If one's to read some of the stuff one reads about your relationship, you've been married for 24 years. Yeah. It's been a fairly hectic one.
Yeah, well, hectic in a sense that we let it all hang out. It's been terrific. And now, thank God, it really, truly is, I think, is richer than ever. It really is richer than ever. And the most satisfying thing, my family is the most satisfying thing, thank God, because I think if your profession becomes the most important thing, it's a shame, in a way, because you're missing something quite wonderful.
What was the most spectacular spat you had in public, do you think?
In public?
Oh, or in private?
Oh, in private? No, wonderful. Oh, before we went together for 4 or 5 years on purpose because we realized that this was a rather volatile relationship, and that maybe we could get rid of a lot of things that might happen in marriage. We'll get rid of them first and then see if we still think it's all hunky-dory. I'm sorry. Oh, God. I hadn't thought of this for a long time. I really hadn't. But so where do you get these questions? They're good. I always said you were the best, Michael. You are. She lived in a little house with her mother, and she had a back apartment. And it had a separate entrance. And it was a little house in Hollywood, and it was only about, oh, gosh, from me to the screen there to the next house. you see, and there was an elderly school teacher who lived there, and her bedroom was right across from the entrance into the back of the house where Felicia's room, and her little apartment, so to speak, her flat. And the door, unbeknownst to me, was hollow. It was 2 plywood doors that had been put in because they built the door, and they had put in a cheaper door so that there was just a plywood, then an inch of air, and another strip of plywood, you see. Wasn't solid. We had a knockdown, drag-out argument about something, I don't know what. And I made what I thought was a very dramatic threat to exit. I gave a long soliloquy saying, and that settles that, and with that, I have said my piece. And I was going to go, and naturally she would say, just a minute. She didn't, she said good night. So I had to go out the door. Now I figured, well, I'll go part way out the door and turn and say, however, and I would continue, you see. Not at all. As I got halfway out the door, it was bang, and it was closed and locked. Now, I was not through. So I knocked on, I didn't want to, there's that lady over there about 10 feet away. She's asleep, it's around midnight. So I knocked and I said, open the door. No answer. Open the door. Open the door, or I am going to break it down. I am going to break the door. Open the door! I hear the shower turn on. Now that really did it. I said, all right, 3, and I'm going to do it. 1, 2, 3, and instead of kicking it, I went, pow, like that with my fist. I was so mad. It went right through the plywood and through the other one. Now it's caught with, like, teeth, an eel's teeth, going that way, and my hand is like this. Now I start saying, don't open the door. Don't open the door. Don't open. And about the 3rd, don't open the door. Julia! Open the damn door. Well, it took me about 15 minutes to get my hand out. She had manicure scissors in hysterics, tears pouring down, laughing, and it struck me funny, too. I think a sense of humor has been a very important thing. Fade out, fade up. 10 years after we were married, I go to open my anniversary present. And I think, oh, and it's frame. I say, it's a painting. I open it up. She had kept the door. She had it sawed off with the hole through it, off-center, like a piece of op art, you know, and a beautiful frame put on it, and the date inscribed down in the bottom, etched into the wood and everything, and gave it to me for our anniversary. It's hanging on our beach house wall.
The war between men and women.
Yeah.
Marvelous. What about, again, this you were mentioning earlier about the effect that work has on your family. You have children, of course. You have a son. Was there a point where what you were becoming because of the parts you were playing, the pressure of your work, was affecting that relationship too?
As a matter of fact, we just did a film together, which was an enormous kick that will be out here in 3-4 months. I don't know when. It's called That's Life. And I did it with Blake Edwards, who directed Wine and Roses and Great Race, and had been a dear friend of mine from the time I ever went out to Hollywood. And Blake produced and directed it. Julie Andrews, his wife, plays my wife. Chris plays our son. Their 2 daughters play the 2 daughters. Felicia's in it for 5 minutes, playing a gypsy fortune teller who seduces me when I think I'm impotent. I mean, all of this casting is based on the theory if you're going to commit adultery, you might as well do it with your own wife.
Keep it the family. Yeah.
Only in a film could you do that. And it was great fun. But it's been difficult for him, I think, because if you are the son or the daughter of somebody who is famous, it's more, or certainly if you're an actor, it is much more of a hindrance than it is a help. Yeah. It's not going to open any doors. Yeah. I wouldn't do that anyhow. I mean, I wouldn't try to use nepotism just to bolster my son's career and say, I'll do this if you give him that part or something. I wouldn't do that unless I would recommend him for a part if I thought he was really right and really ready. And I have done that. But it's tougher because you have to prove more.
Let's now go back to the film career and let's talk about a movie that you obviously enjoyed doing, and it's been very, very good for you and your co-star, Walter Matthau. And it's that wonderful movie, The Odd Couple. One of my favourite movies, I think one of everybody's favourite movies.
that scene.
You've forgotten the scene?
Oh.
Yeah. What do you really think of Mr. Matthau?
The best actor I've ever worked with. Right. I think that with all of the great things that he's done, he has really barely been tapped. I really mean that, too. I mean, I think the man is capable of playing everything under the sun, practically, in deep tragedy to, obviously, broad comedy. His performance in this, I think, is the best comedy performance I've ever seen. It's
wonderful. I agree with you.
And,
well, let's bring on this untapped reservoir of talent, shall we? All right. Mr. Walter Matthau.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was a very fulsome speech that Mr. Lemmon made on
I didn't hear what he said.
You did. Of course you did.
No, what did he say?
He said you're an untapped reservoir of great talent.
He's lying. I have been tapped, and I'm all out of it.
Are you?
Yeah.
Really? It's finished?
Whatever talent I had is out.
It's finished now, is it? This is the end of the line. I don't believe that for a moment.
No, it's absolutely true.
Of course, people assume that that film was the start of your relationship, and in fact, it wasn't, was it? I mean, you made a fortune cookie before that. How, in fact, did you get together in the first place? What was the mechanics of it?
Well, I guess it was Billy. Billy had wanted to write for Walter before, and as a matter of fact, originally in 7 Year Itch, he wanted Walter. And as it turned out through studios and this and that, Walter at that point didn't have a big name in film, although he was a leading actor on Broadway and in the theater. And he kept thinking of Walter, and then finally, with Fortune Cookie, he wrote the part of old Whiplash Willie there with Walter in mind.
But is it true that, in fact, that the roles were reversed, that you were supposed to play the lawyer part? Was that true or not? It's not true.
No, not in that. But it is true in The Odd Couple that he always wanted to play my part.
Did he?
Yeah.
Why?
Always.
Well, originally, I did it on the stage with Art Carney.
Right.
And I thought the Carney part, or the Lemmon part, was the more difficult part, because my role was easy. I mean, you phone it in. Every line was a laugh. I mean, it was simple.
Oh, sure.
I had all the laughs. Felix Unger was just a drudge. He became like the unsympathetic wife in a soap opera. And he had no laughs. Art Carney on the stage, he went crazy with that. I mean, he started drinking like a fish. And he was taking pills, and he got divorced during the run of the play. And he would get out of the hospital Monday morning, and he'd get on the stage. I swear to you.
Sure.
Monday night, he'd say things like, well, what's the matter, Oscar? Afraid of double headers? How are you, Oscar? The thing is, Oscar, on Thursday night, he said, I will tell you. It got so that I played the entire thing with my back to the audience. Now, we didn't have any such trouble with Lemmon in the movie. As a matter of fact, that movie was going to be made with Jackie Gleason and Frank Sinatra.
Really?
Yes.
It's true.
They do that, you know. And Lemmon, they do that in Hollywood. They get a. Now there's Whoopi Goldberg today, for example, who is a magnificent black actress. But I understand she's going to do The Diary of Anne Frank. It's a little silly. It really is silly. I mean, she shouldn't be doing The Diary of Anne Frank.
What should she be doing?
Well, she can do As a matter of fact, I'm going to do a picture with her called Born Yesterday.
Oh, no. She got the Judy Holliday part?
She's got the Judy Holliday part. Now, you know, Judy Holliday was a blonde with ample breasts and ample derriere and other amples. And Whoopi Goldberg is not exactly a sex symbol. And she's been cast in the Judy Holliday part, and I'm her billionaire boyfriend. And I take her to the hotel room, and I take her wherever, you know, and people assume that she is my wife. Now, would anybody believe it? I want to know before I do the movie. Yeah, I'm worried about it.
Yes, you are worried about it.
But she's such a good actress. Will you shut up? You're talking too much.
Oh, God.
Have you worked with many sex symbols in your career?
Yes. My first play was an English play. I mean, I played an Englishman. It was Anne of 1,000 Days, and it was 1948. And I covered about 6 men. The youngest man was 76. I was 27. I remember my first part in it was the courier to the Duke of Northumberland. My lines were, "I've ridden 38 hours and I'm dead for sleep. This is for the Lady Anne. No one's to know," and I collapsed. Now, in order to get collapsible, I used to do knee bends. And in Philadelphia, opening night, I did 65 more knee bends than I usually did. But I came out on stage and I collapsed before I could get the So there, I was on the floor, and I said, "I've ridden 38 hours, and I'm dead for sleep, as you can plainly see." So they cut that out. And then one day I went on for an 86-year-old man named Harry Irvine, and I was playing Bishop Fisher. And Rex Harrison, who was King Henry VIII, couldn't believe that I had the audacity to get out on stage and play an 86-year-old English bishop trying to dissuade Henry VIII from breaking with the Catholic Church. Joyce Redmond, who was Anne Boleyn, wouldn't look at me. She looked upstairs. And Rex Harrison and I came out, and the guy was about 78, named Russell Gage, said, "But Bishop Fisher is the eldest and wisest amongst us, and so he will speak first." And so I said, "I've known you from a child, King Henry. I was present when you took your first 3 steps." At which point, he turned his back to the audience, and he said, "Oh," and then a very rude word beginning with an S.
Oh, shit, he said.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the next 10 minutes, all I could hear was people in the audience saying, "I think he said shit."
I've got to sadly, we've run out of time for this show, but we're not going to let this double act go, because, in fact, we're going to sit here and talk some more. And the results of our endeavours will, in fact, be seen at a later date. In the meantime, Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.